Hey, welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck, and today I'm going to be doing a Christmas book haul. These are all of the books that I got for Christmas, at least up until this point. Of course, with the way that 2020 is, I have not seen everyone for Christmas. So this is the collection of things that I got the few days around Christmas. The majority of this is going to be books that I bought with Christmas money, maybe one or two that I bought myself for Christmas. But when I do come across the one that someone picked for me, I will talk about who got it for me and stuff like that. But I'm going to start with fiction, then move on to poetry, then to nonfiction, which is going to be the bulk of this. So far as fiction goes, I got Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I am possibly the only person on the internet that has not read it at this point. It seems really cute, and I've heard a lot of good things, and I wanted to be sure to read this book before reading their one that's going to be coming out next year. I think it's One Last Stop. I'm really excited for that one. The premise sounds really cool, so I wanted to go ahead and read their first book. The other fiction book that I got was The House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is one that I've seen a number of people talk about as well. It's queer, there's found family. That's basically all I need to know. Next, I'm going to talk about some poetry. The first poetry collection that I have is The Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Vuong. And I believe this is the person who wrote On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. And I have not read that, but it's one that I've really wanted to. I honestly kind of impulse bought this. I saw it. The cover drew me in. The noticeable name definitely clued me in too. And the back just made it seem really neat. So I'll read the paragraph that's on here. Vuong's first full-length collection aims straight for the perennial big and very human subjects of romance, family, memory, grief, war, and melancholia. None of these he allows to overwhelm his spirit or his poems, which demonstrate through breath and cadence and unrepentant enthrallment what a gentle palm on a chest can calm the fiercest hungers. So, that by itself was enough to make me just go ahead and buy this without really hearing anything about it. The next poetry collection that I have is Shame is an Ocean I Swim Across by Mary Lambert. I know Mary Lambert from the song She Keeps Me Warm, which I've listened to an embarrassing number of times because it's on multiple playlists. It's very soft and very gay. And I've had my eye on this for a minute, and have really considered it, and considered buying it, but I just haven't. When you work at a bookstore, there are lots of books like that, where you just stare at them day after day, and eventually you'll buy them. This was my eventually. Christmas was my excuse. One of the things that ended up encouraging me to go get it was that I heard Ariel from She Wants the Diction talking about wanting to read it, and she talked about hearing from somebody about it, which is very distant. But clearly I did not need very much convincing because my eye was already on it, so I went ahead and got this. The final poetry collection I have is Postcolonial Love Poem. So one day I'll be able to film without part of it being corrupted or just plain forgetting something. Today is not that day. Postcolonial Love Poem is a book that I've heard a couple of people mention before. The title was really interesting and drew me in, so I kind of went ahead and bought it. It was the same day that I bought the other poetry books. But it seems like it's going to talk a lot about her relationship with her culture, and the impact of colonialism. Finally, we can get into nonfiction. The first one that I'm going to talk about is the only one that somebody else picked out for me. The rest of these are all just Christmas money. But this one my brother got for me. I gave him my wish list, and he chose one of them. It was actually kind of sweet, I think. We don't really get to talk all that much, but he messaged me and asked, hey, so, do you have all of John Green's books? Because he's heard me talk about John Green before. He was one of my first, I think, favorite authors outside of certain childhood favorites. But that was probably around like 2013 when I lived at the house with him. And I told him, I have all the John Green books that I need. And I just went ahead and sent him the list. And he chose this one, which is very different from John Green. I'm a little bit interested in his thought process behind picking this one, just because I had a lot of books on my list. I'm glad that he chose it, though, because clearly I wanted it. But that is Vulnerability and Resistance, edited by Judith Butler, Zeynep Gembetti, and Leticia Sansbay. So this is definitely not going to be a light read. I'm not 100% sure what all is in here, obviously, since I haven't read it, but I'll read just a little bit on the back to give you an idea. Vulnerability and resistance have often been seen as opposites, with the assumption that vulnerability requires protection and the strength of paternalistic power at the expense of collective resistance. Focusing on political movements and cultural practices in different global locations, the contributors to this articulate an understanding of the role of vulnerability in practices of resistance. They consider how vulnerability is constructed, invoked, and mobilized within neoliberal discourse, the politics of war, resistance to authoritarian and secular power, and LGBTQIA struggles, and in the resistance to occupation and colonial violence. These essays offer a feminist account of political agency by exploring Occupy movements in street politics, informal groups at checkpoints and barricades, practices of self-defense, hunger strikes, transgressive elements of solidarity and mourning, infrastructure mobilization, and aesthetics and erotic interventions into public spaces that mobilize memory and expose forms of power. So this sounds super cool. I'm really excited for this. I actually added this to my list when I was going through and listening to some interviews from Judith Butler and really going through their bibliography. I've read pieces of Gender Trouble, and I've probably read other articles just throughout grad school. But I wasn't really aware of the full scope of what they wrote about, and there's a lot of really cool stuff. So I am really glad that my brother picked this for me. The next book that I have is On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. I mean, the title kind of tells you all of what it's about, so I won't really explain very much further, but it's very timely and seems important. Next, I have The Assassination of Fred Hampton, How the FBI and the Chicago Police Murdered a Black Panther. Fred Hampton was a leader in the Black Panther Party, but he also put together the Rainbow Coalition, which he basically reached out to lots of other groups, lots of other working class groups to really build solidarity. This is one that I've really been interested in. Fred Hampton is a figure that I've wanted to look into for a while, and I was kind of having a problem finding stuff about him. And this was the main thing that I've been able to find outside of recordings of his speeches. So if anyone has recommendations for books on Fred Hampton, I will gladly take those in the comments. The next book I got was The Life and Death of Leticia King, A Critical Phenomenology on Transphobia. Again, title's a little self-explanatory, but this looks at the death of Leticia King, who is a 14-year-old that was shot in 2008 in a hate crime. And from my understanding, this looks at, through this specific case, why it's important that we acknowledge that this is a anti-trans hate crime specifically, and the importance of acknowledging transphobia. While there are a lot of similarities to homophobia, and a lot of it comes from a lot of the same things, it's still important to kind of talk about those differences so that we could address everything that needs to be addressed. That's at least what I assume the bulk of this is going to focus on. That idea is part of why I'm interested in this. I've done a fair amount looking at Trans Day of Remembrance. It's not the main thing that I focus on with my research, but I think this is going to be something that will be helpful for me as a sociologist. And I've got some essays that kind of look at the treatment of trans people, especially trans women of color. And I think this is going to kind of potentially add to that, as well as just generally being an important read. I will be closing out this Christmas book haul with a theology book. I got The Cross and the Lynching Tree by James Cone. This is a Black liberation theology text, so it's looking at African Americans' interactions with Christian theology and looking at how that theology can be seen as something positive and something liberating. I haven't filmed the video for it quite yet, and I probably should do that sometime. But I do have a topical TBR that's looking at theology, and the big things that I'm focused on are different types of liberation theology or theologies that are adjacent to that, like feminist theology and queer theology. James Cone was a name that I saw a whole lot when looking into this, so I'm glad that I finally got one of his books. So that concludes my haul of books that I got for and around Christmas. If you've read any of these, definitely let me know what you thought about them down in the comments, and thank you all so much for watching. Bye!